Hey, I'm JD. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe. Please hit like. And I'm all Sean Connery this morning. Miss Moneypenny. You have to say Spanish onions to do a good Sean Connery impression, by the way. You have to go Spanish onions, and that'll get you in the right mood. So I'm also hatless because I need to cool off my head. So today I'm going to go to part 3 of making the balance staff. I've got a really nice setup right now where I have got my microscope camera right over the top of the lathe pointing down. So I'm not sure how successful this is going to be, keeping the cables out of the way so I don't want to burn anything or break anything, but I'm hoping to get a really good shot. So as you can see in this video, other than the hairs that seem to be stuck here, none of these hairs are mine. It's obvious that these hairs came in likely from my wife. So as you can see, this collar right here is where the balance is mounted, and then if you go up, there's enough rivet material left over to rivet that balance on, even though it's kind of friction fit. I do know some watchmakers that might use glue, but I don't. I'm not a glue guy, so I will friction fit the balance on. And if you go to the next step of the collar right here, this is where the hairspring collet is installed, right? So hairspring with collet, so the collet is slid onto that. It is friction fit, and the cut I've done now, as you saw in the previous video, should be enough to fit that. Then this part here is where I need to make that pivot. So right now I do not know the distance from the collar here to where the end of that pivot needs to be, or the distance of the complete balance staff. So this morning, the first thing I'm going to do is see if I can actually measure the distance between the top of the let me see, get this right here before I stutter. I'll do my the top of the upper balance staff jewel. So you've got the upper balance staff jewel, and I want to measure the top of it to the base, or the other top if you're going down to the lower balance staff jewel, so that the pivots are through both jewels. What is that distance? So I was talking with the administrator of the Facebook Amateur Watchmakers website, Sonny Morehouse. So if you want to join that site, then do it. It's on Facebook, and Sonny's a great guy. I'm giving him some shout outs out there. And Jerome is actually one of the contributing members too, and he's a pretty smart dude. So there's some others out there that are pretty good. Watch with Mike is really good. Watch with Mike is an acquaintance and a pretty good watchmaker as well. And there's others out there. Anyway, and I gotta give a shout out to Chris Spinner too, because Chris Spinner in a very short period of time has become an exceptional watchmaker. So check out Chris Spinner's YouTube videos. They're way more professional than mine. I'm too lazy to go into the 20 hours of production that's needed to get a really good professional video. Someday later maybe, but I'd rather show you just the raw. I'm going to use my name in the third person like all narcissists do. The raw JD. Okay, that's the narcissist thing. Third person. Never use your name in the third person, otherwise you're a narcissist. So I try not to do that. So what I need to do is, Sonny said, hey, why don't you stick a wire through the upper balance jewel right down through to the lower balance jewel, and use that wire to measure how long that balance staff needs to be. And then if I can do that, I can estimate what the pivot length might be, and I'm going to be gaming with the pivot width as the diameter of the pivot, and it's likely 0.11 for a watch of this size. It's a size 16 watch. It's a Swiss-made watch, as I showed you earlier, but it's I can kind of game that, leave it a little longer than needed, and then shave it back. You can't stretch metal, so well, you can a little bit, but you can't stretch pivots. Once you cut them, they're cut, so you got to be very careful. Over here is where the actual roller table will sit, and I didn't chew off a lot of material on the roller table side because I want it to be, this material to be thick enough to support any work I have to do on this side, so I won't warp the balance. If I trim this down too much, any pressure over on this side would warp this overall balance staff, so I wanted to keep the metal on there. So at some point in time when I finish this side, I can shave a bit more metal off of this side and then cut it away, turn it around, and then grab it. Usually I grab it around the collar for the balance itself, and not the collar for the hairspring stud, the hairspring collet, not stud. Gotta get my terms right, man. Gotta get my terms right. Anyway, another person wrote me and said, "Hey, got a lot of dirt and dust on your metal, or leftover metal on your hair, on your work here. Why don't you just get rid of that stuff?" So let me see if my lathe will spin this morning. Yeah, it spins nicely, except you gotta have your stupid belts on, otherwise nothing happens. So hang on a second while I put my belts on here and try not to knock shit over. The other thing is I got a wire for my camera, and it's kind of a little bit interfering with this. It'll be rubbing if I leave it where it is now, but I think I can hook it on to a light or something that I had for the it's going to be rubbing there too. Gee whiz, how the heck do I get this out of the way so it doesn't rub? That's rubbing there too. It's rubbing. That's my name, rubbing. Let me just, I'm going to move it forward in a second. But anyway, this I can clean this up with Rodico, right? And the other thing I did was I took some black tape, and you can't really see it here, but right around there, let me see where you're looking here. Right there on the edge, that's kind of the end of the black tape. I put black tape on the back so when I look at this, I'm not blinded, right? So now, the metal is kind of off, or the leftover shavings are kind of off of that. Now I just got to set myself up for measuring this little problem I have. So let me see if I can do that and show you how it's done. So without farting around too much, here's the movement in my Myers number 58 movement holder. You got to do it like that. So I guess that would be Curly Joe would do that. Myers, hey. Myers, not number 58 movement holder. Hey, I'm a victim of circumstance. I'm not going to slap my face and stuff, but I could do that. I made a nice little drawer over here. I forgot all about it. So it's sort of a pull-out here. I made it with a couple of hinges, and it's secure as hell, and you can push it in and get out of the way. I can't remember. I made it just so I could do stuff over here, and I don't ever use it. Anyway, here's the movement here, and what I have to do is measure the distance between the top of this jewel right here, which is the top jewel, and the base, the bottom of this jewel right here. So what I'll do to start with is I will remove the screws, and I will see if I can pop that cap jewel off and make it bare naked so I can see it. Right, and I don't know, I've got wire that may or may not work. You'll see me click my mouse over here. Watch this. Now here's some wire I procured off of AliExpress, I think, from China. It was spring wire. So I bought this wire not because of the seasons, but because it was spring wire. So this wire had some spring to it. It's pretty darn thin, but I might be able to use it for the purposes of actually remembering what the hell I was going to say. Ow, I just pricked my finger. For the purposes of measuring between point A and point B here. So what I'll do is make a small cut here and grab a piece of the spring wire. I can actually cut a piece because it's showing itself right here. I just need to take this one out. So if I take this out like that, trying to show you on camera, but there's a big long piece of that spring wire. And I don't know if this wire will be thin enough to actually stick through the jewel holes that we have. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to cut this with scissors. If this cuts with scissors, I'll be impressed. It's going to fly, though. It does. It went right onto the floor, and I'm going to step on it later. I got to go find that. Alrighty, there's the spring wire right there. And this is like a nasty guitar string, I guess. The lower E string on your guitar neck. So that's the one I can bend all the way up to probably the third string if I really want to do some good ripping on the guitar. And as you know, I am a guitar guy. So that wire I'm hoping to be able to plant in this. Let me move my camera, actively moving my camera here. I want to be able to plant this wire right through here, and then I will use my microscope actually to mark it, to measure it, and then that'll be the distance that I'll need this balance to travel, the balance staff. So that is recommended by Sonny Morehouse. So kudos to you, Sonny, because that is one hell of a recommendation. I think that's a cool approach to doing the measurement. If I don't do that, I'm really guessing, and I got to guess right on both sides of the balance staff, because I farted up my old balance. And just to show you how I farted it up before I go along, I was attempting to do a repivot on this balance, and I've done a bunch of repivots successfully, but here is a failure of a repivot. And if you look at that balance right there, you can see that one side of that split, the left-hand side of that repivot split on me. And because of the split, I'm not sure why it split, only that the material left over on the sides after drilling was too thin. But somehow that chunk of metal with the, I think I used Loctite, it expanded, I guess. And the expansion of it split the metal, because it did not split when I put it in. It split after. And the other one did not split, but I left a lot of material on the end to be able to make a balance. But I still needed to measure that balance. I should have just left it the way it was, because that would have given me the exact distance of the balance, and I wouldn't have to be doing this. So let's try this out. I'm just going to take these screws out with the balance in situ in place, although I'll likely end up having to take the balance out of the current position to get access to the, that's not working nicely, to get access to that cap jewel. And I can't overstress the requirement that once you, I'll use Rodico here, once you take a screw out or a part out, put it in a tray. Don't put it somewhere on the bench or somewhere. I've done that. I failed over the years at saying I'll put these screws over here, and then I realized after I've done that the screws, that basically I've lost them because they stuck to my arm and blah blah blah. So on very rare occasions, I'm able to move the scissors out of the way. I'm able to take the cap jewel off. There's a score, there's a dot right here, and I want to make sure I put it back in the same position. So I'm going to do a very minor score on the plate here. That's lining up with that dot right there. Sometimes you're able to get your screwdrivers in like this and get that cap out by just rotating. I can see a crack right here, which usually is good, but I slipped there, and I slipped again. It's usually good, but I don't want to be slipping like this too often. Less pressure, folks, less pressure. Jesus, this one here is a screwdriver here or something is like funky. The other one seems to be fine. Let me switch sides. I'm hoping to be able to pull this out. I may use a needle on this side. Sometimes a needle will work, and I've got a few of these needles. I've got a needle I trimmed down incredibly, so, and I'd like to be able to pull it out without having to redo it. So if I take this from the base and use a needle, is that going to move for me? Yes, it is. Look at that. There it is. So just took a sewing needle and sharpened the crap out of it, and then it's able to just get right under there, and there's the part right there. So let me just again grab this with my Rodico and throw it into the bin. Had a couple of screwdriver slips there I didn't like, but that happens. This is not a high-end movement, but it is a nice little movement. It's no jewel, 0 jewel movement. So there's the actual upper jewel here now. Will this fit through? That's the question. So if it doesn't fit through, I need to take that jewel out and then just eyeball where that is, or measure it somehow. No, I don't think that's going to fit through the jewel hole. I need a wire that's much thinner than that. And I'm going to go to my microscope for a second to have a look at, or actually I'm going to use my goggles and just go real close with this. So Now these, just a note here, these are the goggles I use. These are from China. They cost like 20 bucks maybe if you pay too much. I use these on the lathe. The other goggle I put tape on so I can focus on the lathe. And the only reason I put the other goggle on is that if you roll it up like this and you get any ferrous material flying off that metal, it can get in your eye. And you typically don't shut your eye as you're doing work. It's like when you're firing a rifle, you don't close one eye to focus on the thing. You can fire a rifle with both eyes open, and your brain focuses on one side or the other. So if you're used to closing an eye, fine. But I find doing this, put some tape on the end, and while you're using the lathe, you don't have any issues here. But I don't think this wire will fit through. I'm going to grab it again here and look really close. I'm not sure whether I'm going to block the camera or not, but I need to get in super close, and these little goggles will help me. Yeah, this wire is just a bit too fat to fit through there. So I guess that's not good. So now I have to pop this jewel out in order to do this measurement. I can't do it with the jewel in because I don't have a wire that's thinner than this to get through the jewel hole. That would be an impossibility. So now I've got to just pop that jewel out, which means I've got to take the jewel out of its setting, which means I've got to take the balance cock off and do that. So, and I won't show that, it's not necessary. So just looking at this problem briefly, it looks as though the upper part of that jewel, right? If I look at this problem here, you can see the jewel is in deeper because of the setting. And I'm looking at the other side where the jewel might end, and it actually looks like it's at the width of the balance cock right here, this width right here. So I want to be able to measure this width so that I can add that to the length after I've measured the actual jewel. If I've measured between the balance cock and the lower jewel here, I've got to add that width. It's not the same for the bottom because the bottom one is only probably half of that because it's resting up further. So, but I'll make some assumptions here in doing that. So first thing I'm going to do is just measure that width so I have got a good idea of how much I'm adding. I'm not looking for super accuracy with this measurement, so I'll use this very handy little micrometer. It's not my best micrometer, but it's a pretty good one. So I've already zeroed it, and now when I pull this out, I can just measure this width right here, because this is where I think it is. And just measure that, and I want that to add at least that much to the actual width, right? So I'm just going to take this, see if I can measure this under camera here. Just have to make sure I squeeze the right area. And that's it right there, so that's 0.9 millimeters. And I'm going to just flip it over from to the other side, open it up, zero it, zeroed, again, zero it, and then open it up again and crunch on this side and see what I get. And I get 1 millimeter. So I'll just assume I got 1 millimeter to deal with on this side. And then the other side, it's a tricky one on the other side because it's going to go the depth of that lower jewel plus the actual jewel itself. So what I could do there is find a similar setting and just measure the setting. So that might help. So let me see if I can find a setting that looks a lot like that. Turn this off for a sec. So I'm not sure if I'm allowed using the S word, but here's a shitload of jewel settings I have here. So one of these has got to be similar to one of those. So if I take out a jewel setting, if I look at the size of these jewel settings and the type of jewel setting, I'm probably going to get pretty close to the depth of that jewel setting. And these settings, the upper part is usually level with the setting itself, so that might be pretty handy. But to make my life easier, I'm going to just spill out some settings here from maybe this container here. Or let me look at the other container, one with a little less settings. I don't have to spend a week putting them all back. I remember a while ago I just spilt a whole bunch accidentally, and I don't want to do that again. So let me just open the cap up on this here. Oh, friggin' Jesus, I did it again. Jewel settings everywhere. So now I'm down a whole bunch of jewel settings because the cap came off and I just accused myself of doing it and I friggin' did it again. I can't believe it. Hopefully I'll never need any of these jewel settings because there were tons of them here. And I guess I'm going to be on my hands and knees looking for jewel settings. There's a bunch of them landed on my lap here, so I'm going to pick those up and I'll be right back. So I think I found 92.5% of my jewel settings. Well, maybe 100%. I was on the hands and knees, told my wife, she was, yeah, do you really need a hand? No. So I popped this out, should have had it in a plastic bag. Should have moved these to a better container, a vial of some sort, and not this half-ass thing I've got going on here. So anyway, so I'm going to find a setting that's close to this setting and just measure the diameter of the setting. So that setting there is fairly close. I just want to know how wide that thing is. It's not the same type setting, so I'm just going to hunt again and see if I can find a different one here. That's got a bit more depth, like this one here. I think this one here has got the right depth. Let me grab that. That one there, it's a little bit, it's not exactly the same setting, but it's got a bit more depth to it, and I think this one has that kind of depth. So I'm going to just measure that one, put that aside, and I'm going to grab another one here. Say, okay, what if it's this kind of setting? Okay, I think that's two settings, not one. There we go. There's one, and this one also has a bit of depth to it. It's not a similar kind of setting, but it's close. Let me think here. Setting hunting. And I'll just make some assumptions as well after I do this. So there's a nice one here. This one here is pretty good. So I'm going to measure this one as well and just see how thick these settings are. And that would be how much I need to add to the actual value. So I'm going to be very brave and put this back in this container, although I think I want to grab a different kind of vial for this. I have a set of vials that I'll use. I'll do that after. So I'll put this back. Next time I open this, it's going to be inside of a bag. That way it doesn't go flying. And I'm just going to quickly measure these two settings. So the top one was 1 millimeter. And these are, let me see if I can do this without spilling them somewhere. That's 0.5 millimeters. So that's 0.5, and this is what? I think it's thicker than 0.5. And that is 0.6 millimeters. So let's add 0.6, and you can see that the very end of the jewel is level with that setting. So I'm looking at a depth thing. So 0.6 millimeters for the bottom. So I have to add to 0.6 whatever my measurement is when it hits the bottom of this. So that's good enough for now, and I'm going to put these back, but not in that container, because I don't want this thing to go crazy again. I'm just going to throw it into here, because whenever I go jewel hunting, I tend to spill them all and one at a time to see if I can find the right jewel. So that's 0.6, I think, is what I want to add, like that. And I'll show you one more thing in a second. So this tool here will translate the depth of this plunger to the end here, but I'd want this to be at 0 and it's not. And I think to get that at 0, I have to loosen this part of it. See if I can do this on camera here. Loosen this part here, and then just pull it up a bit. I think I got to pull it up a bit. Yeah. Just depends how far this thing will go. I don't think it goes any further than this, because if I tighten it, I still have a little tiny bit of a nubby there. But that nubby might be my 1 millimeters right at the end there. So again, it's just a matter of, I think I have this all the way up to where the gauge kind of ends. And so what I want to do here is basically measure through this setting all the way through, right? So I got to remove the setting from this first. Now what I did notice here is that the edge of these screw holes are level. They're chamfered, I guess the term is, are level with the top of the setting. So if I actually stick that chunk of spring steel through the screw hole down into where the very top of that bottom jewel is, that'll get me yet another measurement. So I'm going to try that just for, what do they say, shits and giggles. All right, here we go. So let me just take this here and put it in. I'm just going to try to do this sort of knocking my head on things. And I'll use they're both the same distance apart. So I'm going to go through the screw hole like that. And see if I can get that down. There, that's down right to the jewel with a little bit of an angle. So right there. Now I'm going to take a marker. And grab a marker here. Oh, why do I have red ones? So I'll grab a black marker here. And I'm going to try to put a mark on this. It's just a small one while I'm pushing down. I don't know if this is going to work. No, I don't think so. I don't think that mark will work. I think if I use my nippers, I might be able to just put a wedge or a dent in it. There, I actually got the ink flowing in a ballpoint pen, so maybe that'll work a bit better. Nope, can't see that. Try technique number 50. So I'm going to see if I can scratch the wire, and then maybe under a microscope I'll see the scratch. To make sure this is pushed all the way down. I'm going to look under my microscope right now and see if I can actually see that scratch. Alright, here's what I did. So I dropped the wire down the screw hole, as you can see right there. And then under my stereo microscope, I held the wire down at the top just a bit. And I scratched. I made the graver tip level with that, with the jewel setting, and it's actually level with the, I think it's called a chamfered, with the chamfered hole, which would be the very tip of the jewel hole. So, and remembering that the pivot has to go up, it has to basically contact the upper cap jewel. So did that, made the world's smallest mark on that, then took it under my times 70 powerful microscope, and I can see flies eyeballs with that, and I saw the scratch I had made, and then I took a pair of nippers, these ones here, and I went in and I put a groove in right where that scratch is. So that, my friends, is where this will be cut, and then that will represent the length of the balance staff. Now I could leave it like this and just use where that groove is as my length. I might do that. That way, if I cut this off, I'm likely going to screw something up. This end piece might fly somewhere. So, but I'd also like to take this jewel out, drop this through, and see what the distance would be and compare it to where that mark is, because this will go all the way down, and I can make sure that this part here, the plunger part or whatever it's called, rests sort of level with the chamfered screw hole, and then I'll look at the difference between the two. Now, given that this wire is actually touching the top of the lower jewel, the balance cock is not screwed in, but it's flat. I want to make sure that I don't have an issue there. So that's that. So I also want to make sure that I don't lose the wire. So what I'm going to do here is take this wire and I'm going to put some Rodico right around it like this. So now the wire has got Rodico on it. Now I won't lose the damn wire. So this is touchy stuff. So all this wouldn't be necessary if I in fact did the measurements on that balance staff beforehand. I might have, but I don't remember doing it. It was such a long time ago. I may have torn them up or something. Maybe I've got a photo of those measurements, but right now I don't have those measurements. So I would have measured it, but I just can't recall. So right where that bend is, that's where you can see a slight bend there. That's the measurement right there. It's just a slight bend. That is the distance from the top of the balance staff pivot to the bottom, and you add a little bit to go through the jewel, and it's 0.6 millimeters. So I can add 0.6 millimeters to the bottom of this wire, and that's the distance I've got to go. So it's that plus 0.6. This could be a tough measurement at the end of the day to do. So I'm going to just put that against my part and see what that looks like now. And then I'll do this with this tool in 2 seconds. And another thing I'm doing here is measuring this against see if I can show that on camera, against the original balance staff, like that. And you can see where I put the pivots on the end, right? So you can look at that and where that balance staff ends and kind of assume where the pivots would be. So that's another measurement I've got. Way too many measurements, folks. I don't want to make a mistake and have to redo this though. Now the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this, push this jewel out with this piece of pegwood safely, like that. That came out nicely actually. And I'll put this jewel, that's the upper jewel, in my container. Try not to lose that on the floor. My wife actually offered to go on the floor to check some more. I may take her up on that later. So now I've got that jewel out, and I really hope you're loving this video, right? So, and I want to make sure that this is flat. Now I pushed it in before to make sure it was in there and flat, but this time I think I'm going to screw it in to make sure I've got no lean on it at all. So let me just grab the screw for the balance cock and put that in place here like this, and I'll screw that in nice and tight. I think this will be part 3 called measurement, balance staff measurement. Now you guys, I want you to tell me, are there better techniques for doing this? Just let me know. Once I get it done, measured, I can chew material off the top or the bottom depending on where it sits in the movement, whether I've got to lower it or raise it or whatever. So here's this device, and I've got to make some assumptions here. One assumption is that part here, I'll measure the distance there I have, but that part here is likely the distance of the top and bottom, both the addition I have to add to both the top and bottom of the jewels. But I'm going to be measuring, I'm going to be sticking this through here and then this rests on the lower rim of that jewel setting, and I'm going to screw that all the way down. So I'm going to pre-screw it down. Pre-screw it down, and then interesting language. So I'm going to do this and just widen it, and I can use the existing wire that I had to measure against this to make sure I'm not too wide. So look at that, and look at where the bend is. I can see where the bend is. I got to go a little further, like this, and look at the bend again. And I go a little further, and then look at the bend. Put my eyeglass down. What I don't want to do is jab my eyeball with this thing. A little bit further, and look at the bend. I think this is pretty accurate, throwing it through that screw hole. Even with a little bit of a lean on it, you're not going to gain much distance. So that right there is absolutely perfect. So when I throw this down through the hole and go to the base, will this be the right distance? So let me look. I'm going to just get down low as I do this. So I apologize for if I get you out of scene here, but I'm just going to touch the top of that jewel right there and see where I end up. So that's the top of the jewel plus that little bit of knobby ends up being the very top of this. So that little knobby's probably too much. Now if I were to level this off, let me try that. Just basically take some distance off this thing, right? Like that, and then go down. Try that again, and then go down. So there we go, that's the top, and if I go down a little bit more, and I can say that the little rim there is level with the jewel setting, or the chamfered screw holes. Go down a bit more and then do that. Okay, so there it is there. And that's pretty much, is that level or a little bit low? I gotta get in a little closer here to look at this. Alright, that's a little bit low. I gotta bring it up a bit more. That is, I think, it's almost perfect. Yeah, that's perfect right there. So that's level. So the question is, what is this distance? So now I've got, actually, I have this distance. It may translate to this, I'm not sure, but I do have this distance. So let me check something else out. I bought two gauges a while back. One's an outer diameter gauge, and this one's just a general inner diameter gauge. So this, I can set this precisely. That's what it looks like. It's vintage, but I can set this precisely to whatever this is saying, whatever reading this is. I can set this absolutely precisely to this reading. So right now, if I look at this, let me move this out of the way here. I'm looking at it pretty close here. And I've got right from the rim to the end, I need to go a bit bigger. From the rim to the end, I need to go a bit smaller. Rim to the end. All right, that a little tiny bit there. That, my friends, is perfect. That's the distance. Now I'm not sure if that translated properly because you got that little nubby on the end I told you about. So there's the distance plus the nubby. Right, so much more accurate. Just taking this measurement and translating it to this tool here. This is going to stay where it is, so there's no problem there. Then I'm going to take my piece of wire that I had from before and look at where this sits, where the bend mark is in the wire. And the bend mark is a little bit bigger. So it's up a little more. So if I trust the bend mark and I can shave the pivots down, this might be where it needs to be. Yeah, the bend mark is adding just a bit more. So if I plunge this thing down again, let me plunge this down and see where it ends up. I may do this with a microscope, actually, because I'll be able to see it a bit better. But when I plunge this thing down, all the way down to the jewel, like this is where it ends up level. This is where it ends up level with the screws, I think. And it is touching the jewel. It might have to go up just a bit. It would go out just a little bit. Let me just pull this out just a bit. Right there. So that's a bit bigger. And let me look at the transferring that to this. You know what? There's not much difference. Just a tiny bit different. Back it out a little. A little more. All right, right there. So I'm very comfortable with that distance. And I'm not sure what that looks like for the wire. The wire is as accurate as I could get it. But let me look at where the wire and the bend is in the wire. And it's so close. So close to where that bend is. Where I crunched it. All right, so to be safe, I'll probably use the wire, but I'll leave this as my measurement. But then I would have to increase this measurement slightly to compensate for the pivot. And the pivot is a 1 millimeter. It's a 1 millimeter increase, or actually the bottom one is 0.6 millimeters increase, right? So I'd have to increase the size of this by 0.6 millimeters. Let me look at my deuxième gauge here and see what that looks like. Let me see, what do I got now? I got, right now, the distance between the two things is 55, around 55. Yeah. And I'm looking at the upper scale of this thing, so 55. So if I add 54, 55. I'm closing this down. I'm just looking at the deuxième gauge and trying to use that as my measurement. Let me just move my camera over a bit here so it's not so clumsy. So I'm looking at this here, but I'm looking at the end here to see where it ends up. And if I measure this at 55, I'm just trying to make sure the two ends are the same, right? Because all I want to do is look at the measurement up top, and it's exactly 55. And if I were to add another millimeter, right, I'd be here. I'd be there. So 0.6 at 55, 0.6 millimeters gets me here. So that's the increase. So if I increase this by 0.6 millimeters, so that's 60, that's 61. right? So let me screw this back a bit and see if I can get it to 61. 61 is what I'm looking for. So what's it at now? It is at 58. Draw that back a bit. Right there, like that. That is 62. Let me see if I shrink this just a bit. Right here and here. Right about there. That is 62. So let me tighten it just a bit. There. See what I got here. That's 61. That's 61. So now I've been just moving this slightly here to get this to 61, which is right about there, right? So this should be the right distance for the new balance staff, right here, right? And if I look at the plunger, it's the plunger going down plus a little bit on the end here to go through the jewel. It looks a bit bigger than it should, but I don't mind cutting it a bit bigger. So that is it right there. And if I look at the wire, you look at my bird on a wire here and where the bend is. So I look at the wire and where the bend is, and I'm kind of just above the bend. So that is, I'm pretty comfortable with this distance for the cut. So I can use this here to just scribe that onto the balance staff. So let me get back to the balance staff in the lathe. All right, there's the old balance staff matched up, and here's my distance. And I'm going to check again. I want to check with the wire wherever the hell it is. Oh, it's hiding. So if I look at this wire and the bend in the wire, that's where the bend is, right there. And I look at where I want to cut the staff. I can make 2 marks on there with this device here. So I just want to confirm again that where I measured and the bend are good. Yeah, it's good. So I'm just slightly bigger than the bend in the wire. So I'm just going to throw the wire into my watch parts container here, and I'm going to use this, stay away from the screw here, and see if I can score this to where it needs to be, right? And I'm just going to make sure I've kind of got equidistance here, like so, like that, to where this might be. That's kind of equidistance there. And again, I'm doing a bit of guessing here. And I kind of just realized that this is having a hard time scoring it. So what I'm going to do is take a bit of marker and put it onto the tips here and see if I can transfer the marker ink to the part, and then that'll constitute scoring it. So I'm going to go right around here. Again, it's not wanting to do that, so I got to think out of the box here for a sec. So I think what I'll do is just actually mark the part. So I'm looking at this distance here, like that. And that's one of my marks. That's not too bad right there. I want this mark on the left, this farther mark, to be the base, and I'm going to move this one over just a bit. So then I can score it with my graver. So let me just do that and then see how tight I am or close I am to the right distance. You know where that one is now. And then the other one, look again here. That's right there. The other one is just inside of the marker. Right there. So I'm just eyeballing this here right now. So I think it's right here. So I think I'll part it right here when I actually go through and part this thing. Get my other glasses on and I'll part this one right here, and that'll be the start. Those will be the two pivots on both sides. So that's that. So that's where they're both scored. Let me get my other graver out here to make sure I got the lines really good here. This is my 2mm graver, so just going to part that right here, and I lower the tool rest here just a bit. Get that in there like that, and I don't really need to have this in here anymore. I'm going to put that in my parts bin and tighten that up like this, and very close to going to lunch here, but it's right there. Whenever your tool rides underneath, let it go under. If you stop it, you break the part or you bend it. And hold it at just a bit of an angle. I should be a bit closer to the part right now, so I'm just going to cut it a bit and then go to the next one and cut that one a bit. That's where it needs to be, right there. So I'll leave that where it is because I don't want to cut that off. I just want to make sure that it's the right distance, because I want the shaft to remain there as I finish the pivot on the other end. So again, there's my distancing. There's there and there. If you look at that, gotta move my pointer up a bit. So it's a little longer than I got, but I can shave that off. But if you look at that, that's the measurement translated to the balance staff. I'm looking at my camera right now, right there and there. See that? So that's good. So all I need to do is have some fun. Who said that? All I need to do is have some fun. I just need to cut off. I need to part this part here. Which I could probably part with a graver as opposed to parting with the thing. So So that's it for now. I'll make this part 3 measurement. Thanks for subscribing and watching this crazy long video, but this is not an easy job.